Our particular aim was to provide a comprehensive analysis of macro factors influencing everyday practices and behaviors in the workplace. And we investigated 6 European case studies of large-scale organizations, already mentioned by Professor Ricardo Garcia Mira and Professor Marino Bonaiuto. And all of these organizations are operating under different national and international context and occupying different positions that are relevant in the sustainability debate. We have analyzed these macro factors as reflected in organizational documents, but also we looked at how people understand and perceive the influence of these macro factors on their everyday behavior at work. We outlined the general conclusions drawn from local research, taking into account the main objectives. You can see on this slide our main objectives. During these last 3 years, we used different theories and models from organizational and work psychology, but also from environmental psychology. But finally, we choose to integrate our results, taking the recommendation from Professor Virilia Bons. So we have organized these groups of factors based on Bronfenbrenner's ecological system theory in order to better understand the nature of their influence. Briefly, according to this theory, the interactions with others and the environment are key to development of people's behavior and practices. Our presentation focuses on the macro system as structural factors and on the ecosystem as organizational factors influencing sustainability-related everyday practices in the workplace. So, on the most influential structural factor identified in our studies is the political economic context in which organizations operates. We found that the political economical context impacts differently the two different types of organizations, public and private organizations, based on a few major criteria, such as the degree of political influence, the different ways of access to funding, and the level of market pressure. Just an example, we found a favorable balance in our case studies, which is a private operator of public water and wastewater services. Having the municipal authorities as shareholders, the company has obtained an increased amount of funding from different bodies, and therefore they did large investments in environmental infrastructure and technology. The second influential structural factor identified in our studies is the legislation and regulation. Legislation on greenhouse gas emissions and policies at the European Union and national levels are major drivers of the actions on carbon emissions in all the case studies organizations. The eligibility for accessing European funds exert a pressure upon the organizations to meet the standards imposed by the European Union. This was found especially in the case of service providers. We identified a number of factors that can influence these activities. For example, the organization's specific domain of activity, the obligation to meet the standards imposed by European Union, the eligibility for accessing European funds, national standard of living, general level of awareness in the society in general, and the need to possess an exemplary image in front of the general public. So the third influential structural factor identified in our studies is reputation. Findings from the local project demonstrate that the issue of reputation can act as both a driver and a barrier to the occurrence of sustainable practices. The building and maintaining of a good reputation is a key element of economic success on the market. Even if economic success is not a key concern of public institutions, reputation has still turned out in our research to be a key driver for sustainable practices. But I will stop with the subject here because I know that Professor Nora Ratzel and Professor David Hazel will continue more about reputation in their presentation. So, we already presented some structural factors which influence the sustainable practices, and I will continue with organizational factors, such organizational culture and climate influenced by organizations' vision, missions, values, organizational structures, workplace norms, human resource management, and organizational priorities and vertical relationship within the organizations and horizontal relationship among workers. Of course, the organizational factors that had the most important influence on sustainable practices, in our case, study organizations, were organizational prioritizes and vertical and horizontal relationships among workers. But I would like to say something special about what will happen in our case study. From our case studies, organizational factors promoting sustainable practices, the most important organizational factors promoting sustainable practices were hierarchical culture of the organization, the environment management system, technology, leadership, and facilities. Of primary importance in the hierarchical culture of the organization, based on observing the procedures and rules in a climate of stability and control, show us that within this organization, in our case study organization, Agua Team from Timișoara, the authority resides in regulations and rules and the power exercises by specialists. Therefore, there are specialists in environmental issues in the Department of Environment who ensure and monitor the implementation of environmental management system, regulations and procedures in the entire organizations. Besides, in each of the other departments and branches of the organizations, there is a specialist responsible with environmental matters. The results of our studies showed that most of the sustainable practices, the organizations followed the implementation of environmental management system. People use to expect their supervisors and managers to tell them how to behave in the workplace, and used to comply with the regulations and rules and to follow the procedures. Another crucial factor found to facilitate sustainable practices is our organizations is technology. In fact, one of the main assumptions in the culture of our organizations, but in the other many organizations with the same structure, is that the technology has the main role in diminishing the greenhouse gas emissions of the company. It appears that people in this organization don't think the individual practices can make an important differences. And I would like to finish with 2 more ideas. The leadership seemed to have the key role in explaining the inconsistency between the levels of engagement in the different sustainable behaviors across location in the same organization, and there are more different facilities offered in a particular locations. Professor Marino Bonaiuto already discussed about these situations. Okay, thank you again, and I would like to thank you on behalf of our Romanian team. You can see here all the team. Professor Zoltan Bogati, Professor Alin Gavreliuc, Professor Alin Sava, Assistant Adina Dumitru, Research Assistant Alexandra Stancu, Research Assistant Daniela Moza, and Lecturer Ildiko Erdei and Andrea Ionescu. For all of us, it was a very pleasure to be involved in this project, and thank you again, Ricardo, for this opportunity.